I didn't even realize how screwed up this was at the time, but looking back, I feel kind of lucky. I haven't really had many encounters like this in my life. I'm a chubby male, so creepers tend to leave me alone. When I was 19, I lived in Kentucky, pretty far away from my northern Michigan hometown. It was this little town called Pikeville, where there was very little crime. I actually kind of missed it and want to go back, but I digress. My family came down to visit me for my birthday that year, and we agreed to meet up at the Hardys in town that morning after they got into town. I got there a lot earlier than them, me being the type to show up 15 minutes early, and them being the types who show up way late. As I was standing outside waiting, this guy walks up to me. If you've ever lived in a place like this, you know everyone is super friendly, so it didn't strike me as odd when he started talking to me. During our conversation, all kinds of alarm bells should have been going off. Like, after he found out I went to the college, he said he saw me at a party. This isn't possible as I've never once went to a party. When he found out I'm a gamer nerd, he started about playing D&D all the time. He kept taking sips out of some sort of alcohol bottle. Mind you, it's like 10 a.m. at this point, and kept offering me some. There were a few other things like this. He started talking about how he lost all of his friends because he got into drugs, and I felt a little bad for him. He asked if I wanted to walk around for a bit, and since I knew my family wouldn't be there for a little while, I went. The guy had been talking about how he lost all of his friends due to drugs, and I felt bad for the guy. That, coupled with the fact that I hadn't had any encounters like this, and the lack of crime kind of disarmed that warning part of my brain. We walked and talked for a little while, maybe 10 minutes, before I realized we were in a shady-looking part of town. I had never even realized there were shady parts of this small town, but here we were. We stopped in front of a house that looked long abandoned with this dark, narrow, sketchy alley next to it. He starts talking about how he knows the two girls that live here and how they like to party and whatnot. He tells me about how DTF they are and asks if I want to meet them. It was at this point that my common sense finally kicks in. I'm in a terrible part of town with a sketchy guy I don't know who was just talking about doing hard drugs and no one knows I'm here. And now he wants me to go into an obviously abandoned house under the guise of meeting some ladies. I obviously declined his offer and immediately said I needed to get back as my family was probably waiting. He seemed a little upset about this and then asked if I could help him move a pool table into his van, which was conveniently parked down the alley. I declined this as well. This is when he began to reach into his jacket pocket. Since those bells started going off, I realized just how much this guy looked like he might stab me, and this terrified me. At this moment, my stepmom did the only kind of thing she ever did for me. She called to see where I was. I took this as an opportunity to hastily exit, and the creep followed me for 3 more blocks. I don't know what exactly this guy wanted, but it was probably just to rob me. Still, that area has a good amount of disappearances and is one of the worst areas in the country for human trafficking, I later found out. I don't know what would have happened had I agreed to help, but I can't help but think of that one scene from Silence of the Lambs where Bill lures a victim into his van. I hope he got the help he needed and is doing better, but I also hope just as much that I never have the misfortune of running into him again. Tonight I was at work. I clean a shopping mall, and a very polite goth teen, green hair, black clothes, approached me asking about a potential job. I gave him information on a job center in town and went on my way. About an hour later, I'm walking back a hallway towards the bathrooms that I have to check every hour. The same kid passes me, ducking down a service corridor. People use those all the time here, so I don't think anything of it, until a very large pack, about 10 to 12, of redneck teens comes back the hall together. One boy walks into and searches our men's room. A girl sticks her head into the corridor and says, "No one's there, but it goes all the way through to another door." They are actively hunting the green-haired boy. I walk past the group, thinking to get out of earshot and radio security to deal with it. Rounding a corner, the direction they had come from, I see that the pack had shut the fire doors, effectively closing off the public hallway from sight. I call security and they arrive at the group of teens who claim that the goth boy flashed a gun. Cops are called, they find and frisk the goth kid to find that he has no weapons other than pepper spray. The group of stalkers is sent home for the day and the boy stays for a few more hours. Nothing came of it, but based on the pack's actions, secluding the hallway and organized hunting, I wonder if we wouldn't have been calling in a body if they'd found that goth teen. This takes place around 10 years ago. I was around age 16. My family owns a business located in a little rural town. Not much happens around here and it is a fairly quiet and safe place. I still live in the town and I often leave my house unlocked during the day and leave our keys in our vehicles. The business sat back off the main road pretty far and was pretty secluded and surrounded by trees. Honestly, I always felt a little creeped out being there after dark by myself to begin with. Our office was a modular office trailer, the kind they often rent out to construction sites. When you went into the main door, to the left was a large open room where the office was. Straight ahead was the bathroom, and to the right there was a storage room. One late evening, my mom said she had forgotten something in the office and was going to go get it. I volunteered to go grab it for her. Like I said, the place at night always gave me a weird feeling, so I didn't want her going alone. I drive down to the office and pull into our well-lit parking lot. It was a cool, clear evening with a moderate breeze. I get out my key, unlock the large deadbolt, and open the heavy door. I flipped on the lights and made a sharp left into the main part of the office. I now had my back to the only exit and to the storage room. I started looking through her desk for the items she needed. I heard a creaking noise coming from behind me. I instantly froze in fear. My combination of being jumpy and the place already giving me the creeps sent my mind into overdrive. I tried to rationalize and set my mind at ease. After all, it was windy out and there were tree limbs that could reach the building on that side. I finally gained the courage to turn around and peer into the room. The light from the office flooded into the room and I could see to the black wall, and as far as I could tell, nothing was there. I chalked it up as the wind, found what I needed and slowly approached the door, my eyes never leaving that doorway to the storage room. Part of me wanted to look what made the noise, but my instinct was screaming to just let it go. I listened to my instinct, walked out of the door backwards with my eyes never breaking contact with the room. I just had such a bad feeling about it. I reached in through the door, flipped off the lights and locked the deadbolt, got in my car and went home. I never bothered telling anyone about it that night, figuring it was just my imagination getting the best of me. The next day we found the window for the storage room was broke out and we had actually been robbed. To this day, I truly wonder if whoever was robbing us was hiding in that room while I was there, and what would have happened if I would have investigated. Worse yet, what would have happened if my mother would have gone there alone. June 14th, 2018. This has sort of been an ongoing thing for about a month, but only really escalated to creepy territory tonight. I was almost hesitant to post this here because I truly care about the villain of the story, but it's recently become too much for me to hold in and keep to myself. I'm a dietary aide at a local assisted living facility. If you're not familiar with those, they're sort of the step before nursing homes. Our residents are healthy enough to live relatively independently, and we only assist them in their daily routine. The one that I work at really feels like the opposite of a nursing home. Rather than being cold and clinical, it's warm and almost feels like a lavish hotel. My job as a dietary aide is to assist in preparing food, serving food to the residents, cleaning the kitchen and dining room, etc. Think of it as like being a waiter for the same group of people every day. To give you a little background, I'm a 17-year-old girl who just graduated high school and is pursuing an associate's degree in pre-med at a local college before moving away to university. I've been working at this facility for around a year now and have grown to really know pretty much all of my residents. One of these residents is Mary, who is mostly deaf and who lives there with her 3 sisters. When I first started working there, Mary and I didn't really talk much or anything beyond me bringing her drinks and taking her order. I could hardly understand anything she said anyway. However, I knew that she was lonely due to the communication barrier between her and others, so I attempted to reach out to her a little bit. I would smile and wave at her, ask her how her day was, etc. It wasn't anything I didn't do for my other residents, but it excited her immensely. Mary is a very touchy woman, and by that I mean she likes to touch those she's talking to, pat them, hug them, etc. I'm autistic and I usually jump when touched, but for some reason she never made me uncomfortable. I took this as a good sign, and I allowed her to touch me since I knew it was her way of showing affection, since talking wasn't very easy for her. It started as pats on the back and shoulder, then it was hugs, then full-on embraces. Now she's at the point where she feels the need to kiss me over and over. This was the point when I became a bit uncomfortable with the contact, but only because I was afraid of how it might be perceived. I have short hair and an overall butchy and masculine appearance that makes many residents with memory issues believe that I'm a man, and I'm also openly a lesbian. One of my coworkers had to be physically separated from a resident who was romantically pursuing her, and I was afraid that my interactions with Mary would be seen as romantic or overtly sexual. Just to clear things up, I'm not attracted to Mary, and I'm almost certain she's not attracted to me. She just constantly assures me that she loves me and that I'm really sweet, but she never came off as flirty or anything. After a few weeks of this, Mary had become persistent. When she's done eating, she stands by the kitchen door as I do dishes and simply watches me, waiting for me to come out and talk to her. In really busy times, she waited almost an hour for me to be free, just standing in the doorway and looking in. As I'm serving food and taking orders, she watches me. Co-workers and residents usually find it sweet or funny how she reacts, but she literally won't let me go once she has a hold of me. She's actually a really tiny woman, but she's strangely strong, and even if she wasn't, I can't exactly push one of my residents away. So I'm pretty much forced to deal with the hugs, kisses, and assurances of her love until either I or a coworker can get it through to her that I have to go back to work. Even then, it doesn't always work out since she's half deaf. She usually understands what I'm saying after a while, but whenever a coworker comes to my rescue, Mary becomes strangely hostile towards them, holding me tighter and saying she'd hold me for the rest of her life if she could. Tonight went as usual, with Mary waiting for me and attacking as soon as I stepped out of the kitchen. One of the CNAs told her that I had to get back to work, and Mary gave her literally the dirtiest, meanest look I had ever seen her give, and whispered to me that she would be back later. As a coworker and I were closing the kitchen, Mary showed up again, just like she had promised. My coworker was getting the mop water ready in the back of the kitchen, and I stepped out to clean the counter in the dining room when she latched on to me.
"No one can bother us now,"
she said, and I heard it pretty clearly.
"She didn't like it,"
she continued, most likely talking about the CNA that interrupted her. Mary embraced me, kissing me over and over, and told me how much she loved me and how she would love me for the rest of her life. After about 5 minutes, I was determined to get back to work, but she just hugged me tighter. Eventually, someone was trying to get a luggage cart through the dining room, so I tried to break it off to let them through, but Mary just dragged me to the other side to let them through without letting me go. It was nearly 10 more minutes until I could convince her to let me go. According to the CNAs, all Mary talks about is me. Even though I'm off, and Mary knows I'm off, she waits for me as though I might show up somehow. I truly do love and care about Mary, and I often wonder what made her latch on to me. I don't know if I remind her of someone from the past, or if she just happens to really like me, but it's getting to the point where her life revolves around me, and she's willing to fight against anyone who gets in the way of that. It would be really sweet and cute if she just happened to like me, but she can't stand to be away from me. What really scares me is how she retaliates against everyone in order to be with me. My mom's theory is that Mary knows her life is coming to an end, as she's at least 85 to 90, and finds some sort of comfort in me. And then I thought about the theory about Mary, how she might think I'm a man, and it turns out that was the case. One of the administrators at work told me to avoid Mary until they could talk to her about the situation, and as I did dishes tonight, we had the kitchen doors closed so Mary couldn't get to me. She started banging on the door, staring in at me. When a CNA told her that she needed to leave me alone and let me do my work, Mary then said, "I want him." And the CNAs tried to explain to her that I was not only a girl, but also a minor. And this just sent Mary into a frenzy, as she claimed that they were lying and that she wanted to be with her man. She started making threats, both legal and physical, and eventually it was decided that corporate would be brought into it and decided if the best option would be kicking her out since she technically sexually harassed a minor. I was told this by one of my coworkers who was helping to guard the door, and I was stunned, horrified, and a lot of other things I can't really describe. This whole time, all of the kissing, touching, holding, it was all sexual. All the time she invited me to her room, it wasn't just to hang out with me, it was to do things with me. The woman I had thought of as a sort of grandma-esque figure was romantically obsessed with me, and I can't help but feel violated. Even though she wasn't allowed to come near me, she sat by the dining room sobbing, feeling as though her only love was taken from her. It's sort of a difficult situation since I truly do love her, but not in the way that she loves me. I know now that she's not all there in the head, and I wish that I would have known this before reluctantly allowing her to kiss me on the mouth and touch me on the chest and thigh. I just thought this was her strange way of expressing herself through touch, but it seems that I was simply too optimistic. So my friends Carol, Xander, Maria, and Vanessa and I all decided to go to a traffic light party that was held in our high school. We all met at Vanessa's to drink beforehand and have fun in case the party was whack. Thereafter, we went to the high school. We arrived right at the start and none of our other friends were there. We then decided to go into a back room where the teachers had laid out chips and soda for students who weren't planning on drinking. We sat and relaxed, and our other friends slowly arrived. For some background information, Carol had a really creepy admirer. He was in Maria's class and was a bit older than us. His name was Jacob. Jacob was known for being a huge pothead and not being afraid to experiment with other substances. He was constantly seen being slow and weird during school time, which I assume was him being high or something. He had met Carol at a previous party and fell head over heels for her. Even though they only spoke for a minute at that party, after the party he had texted her every day saying how Carol had a heart of gold and that she was the light of his life. This obviously creeped her out and she confronted him and said that the feelings were not returned since they had only met each other once. This angered Jacob, and he decided to be pretty aggressive about it. Ever since that happened, Carol had received death stares from Jacob during school time. But fast forward to the traffic light party, after being in the back room for a while, we decided to go out to the dance floor. We sadly lose Vanessa in the crowds, so it's just me, Xander, Carol, and Maria dancing. I then spot Jacob circling us. He clearly was under the influence, and I warned Carol and the others. We quickly went outside in an enclosed area for smokers. Lots of people were there, and we had some convos with a few peeps we knew. I then spot Jacob on the other side of the enclosed area, and he had a friend with him. I then told Carol that we had to go again, and we decided to take cover in the teacher's back room. We sat and relaxed, but guess who showed up? Jacob and his friend. They sat at a table behind us, and Carol got really scared. Jacob kept repeatedly pointing out Carol for his friend. We then decided to go again, and this time we went for the dance floor. We stayed there for 30 minutes, and I saw Jacob stalking us through the crowds multiple times and giving me death stares constantly. I have never, ever seen anyone that angry, and I had never spoken a word to the guy. He literally gave me the, "if I get my hands on you, I'll break you in half" stare. I was so scared that I didn't want to turn my back on him in fear of what he would do. We go up to the bar and order some drinks, and I spot Jacob and his friend again. Jacob is growing increasingly aggressive and tries to run towards us, but his friend stops him from coming over. I then recognize Jacob's friend from one of my classes from middle school. At this point, he comes close enough to Xander and me and tries to lunge out after us. At this point, we had enough and we make a run for it. My heart was beating like crazy. I had never been in any direct danger before that, and I was incredibly scared. We ran over to the security guards and told them everything. They confronted Jacob, and he almost crapped his pants. We then went back to the teacher's back room and calmed down. I then saw Jacob's friend that I used to go to school with. I confronted him, and he said that Jacob was indeed under the influence and that it was not alcohol. He agreed that Jacob's behavior was unacceptable and apologized to us on behalf of him. I have not seen Jacob since then, and heard from Maria that he doesn't show up for school anymore. To preface and give some context, I'm a 21-year-old male who makes a habit of taking road trips across the US, and I'm not one who is inexperienced when it comes to hiking or dangerous situations. I have had people stalk my camp in Kansas and stare over my fire in Utah with a shotgun. Point being, I've had weird experiences, but none that have ever chilled me like this one. This just happened earlier today, and I want to get it out while the image is still sharp in my mind. I was out hiking a trail in southern Indiana with a female friend of mine. It was around 90 degrees and muggy as all get out. The trail specifically is the Three Lakes Trail and is a little over 10 miles long and is circular, so nearly impossible to get lost. We had arrived early in the morning, so there was almost no one in the park at all, save for a few parked vehicles. We had been hiking the trail for about 3 hours and had not seen a soul. Usually I pay attention to my surroundings a bit more and am cautious of people just because of life experiences and hearing stories like this, but with good conversations and laughs, I was distracted. My friend and I are walking downhill towards a sharp left turn when, out of seemingly nowhere, a woman steps around the bend and starts hiking up the hill towards us with her head down. She was average height, but much more muscular than a typical woman. She is wearing a sports bra, short shorts, and a backpack which left most of her body exposed. Her tattoos are what first caught my eye. All across her body are these weird shapes and symbols that didn't make much sense. I didn't see anything that resembled a picture or English words. As she came within about 10 feet of us, she looked up and we made eye contact. And that is when everything in me just froze up. Her face had similar symbols tattooed all over and in strings all over her face. Her eyes, though, are what I'll remember for a long time. They were just black sockets, and in the shade of the dense canopy, I couldn't make out much about what it actually was. With how humid it was that day, I don't believe that the dark sockets were makeup, and so I assume that all around her eyes were tattooed solid black. On top of this, she must have had color contacts in her eyes, as there was no white at all. With every horror and cult scenario I've ever heard running through my mind and her face chilling me to the soul, I blurted out, "Good day for a hike." She just looks at me with this empty stare, holds eye contact, and walks by us. I had never been so shaken up from running into someone out on a trail before, and hope never to see something like that again. This happened over 10 years ago. My brother was 6 years old at the time. We lived in an area where the summers were nice and mild, so we'd always play outside in our front yards as kids. You know, doing little kid things like melting down action figures or turning over rocks or following ants, etc. Very suburban stuff. On this day, my brother was probably doing something like that. My mother was inside her house working on paying the bills. It was probably 4 or 5 in the evening, just a typical slow-moving summer day. My brother tells me that he was minding his own business when a dark blue, low-rising car suddenly flashed down the street. Now, keep in mind, we had neighbors who lived next door to us who had 2 teenage sons. The sons had a similar colored and styled car, and they liked to speed home, so my brother initially thought nothing of this and went back to his little kid routine. Suddenly, though, someone in the car rolled down the window and called out, "Hey!" to my brother. My brother jerked his head up and realized this was not our neighbor's car. The man driving the car had close-cropped hair, so blonde it was almost white, and a reddish, ruddy complexion. My brother put his age at 25 or younger. In the passenger seat, my brother noted that the accompanying man was either Hispanic or native, dark-complected and young as well. The car quickly swerved and parked next to our neighbor's house. In a matter of seconds, the Hispanic man bolted from the passenger side door and lunged for my brother. Thankfully, my brother's animal panic kicked in and adrenaline forced him up, and he ran fast into the house, crying and screaming. My mom instantly ran outside, knowing what had happened. She had a protective rage all mothers know acutely. She saw that the car had now sped away and watched as the exhaust trailed behind. She got a glimpse of the drivers and the car as well, but sadly could not get the license plate. My mother called the police to report the presumed abduction attempt. My family is still angry about this to this day, But the police took their sweet time. They came to our house an hour later, took down the information my mother and brother gave them, and pretty much shrugged. They said there was nothing they could do and didn't seem too concerned. My mom argued with them, but they just took down her information. I don't think they filed a report. I don't know what exactly these men wanted, but I have grim ideas. We live in a smaller town that is closer to a bigger city. It's very possible that they scouted my brother and saw him as a target for human trafficking, or who knows what. I shudder to think what could have happened if the timing had just been a little bit different, if my brother had not had the agility to run inside, if his legs had turned to jello instead, or if our house door had been locked or my mother not home. These two men cost me and my brother some childhood innocence, and we no longer could play outside in our carefree way. It was 2015. I was in my second year of university, and to give context, I lived at home and simply drove to class since the university was only 15 minutes from my house. I lived in a condo that was pretty upscale, and it was situated right at an intersection, so when you exit the parking garage, you'd have to wait at a signal. I had quite an expensive car that my parents had bought me, and it often stuck out in a crowd. My city is quite safe though, so I've never felt threatened and often drove with my window down. It was fall, so everything was quite peaceful and chill. One morning, I was coming out to the parking garage and waiting at the signal to turn left when a Jaguar drove up beside me. I didn't think anything of it and continued to listen to my music when I see him roll down his window and gesture for me to look at him. Thinking he needed directions or wanted to get in my lane, I turned the volume down and he immediately said, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Flattered, but not interested because I had a boyfriend and I know I'm not beautiful, I said thanks awkwardly. Before university, I had been to an all-girls private school in another country, so I had really little experience with guys flirting or compliments like that from strangers. He then insisted that I give him my number and that we could go out for coffee sometime. I said no thanks, that I had a boyfriend, but thanks for the compliment. He insisted that I give him his number. People on the sidewalk were now looking because he was yelling quite loudly through his car to mine. Wishing the signal would open, I didn't know what to do, so as an inexperienced young woman who watched way too much TV, I decided to just give him a fake number. Bad idea. He took out his phone, and thank God the signal opened, so I booked it out of there, and I'm guessing he turned right. When I got to university, I totally texted all my friends about it, and we laughed at how he would call the number and find out it wasn't mine. I wish that was the end of it, but it wasn't. A few days later was the weekend, and two of my friends and I decided to go watch a movie at the theater across the street. If anyone knows the Mississauga downtown area, they know that everything is in the same area. The theater, the mall, the community center, everything. So we were sitting in the concessions area waiting for them to open up our theater to enter, and this guy walks up to me. He's all like, "Oh hey, I tried calling you, but I think I got a wrong number because it kept going to some old lady's number." I'm just shocked at this point, but don't think much of it because we're in my neighborhood and it's totally possible to run into him. I once again iterate that I have a boyfriend and that I wasn't interested. My friends get all protective too and probably see my body language, so one of them steps up and says, "Hey buddy, she's not interested. Her boyfriend's coming any minute now and you don't want to meet him." He mumbled something that I couldn't hear and just says that he'll see me later. At this point, I'm a little creeped out. For the next few days, I see him every morning at the signal. Somehow he knows my timings and gets lucky enough to be right beside me every time. I've started driving with my windows up at this point and have my sunglasses on every day so he doesn't see my expression. He horns, he rolls his windows down. One day he got really close to the side of my car to yell something closer. I try my best to ignore him. However, I can't really do much about it because he's technically not done anything illegal. Here's another problem. I know he lives near me, but the problem is that my parking garage is shared by my building and another building, so I don't know which one he could live in. I can't report him to the building security. They're pretty useless and don't care, and it's getting on my nerves, but I don't know what to do. The final straw was when I was in my university library trying to get books for an essay. I'm in the quiet zone working near the aisle when I notice this guy looking at me from the sofa area. I'm not very good with my far sight and just thought the person was spaced out like many others in the library. I was curious why this person wouldn't look away after a while, so I asked the guy beside me in the individual study desk area to take a picture of me. Since the stare was in the shot, I was able to zoom in and take a better look. The student complied and I zoomed in. It was him. This guy, he's like at least 28 to 34. He looks nothing like a student, no bag or anything near him, so there's no way he's there for freaking books. Coincidences don't happen this often. At this point, I'm freaked, so I go to the front desk with books and I ask to check out. I tell the girl at the desk of what's happening. She graciously arranged for the senior librarian, a 6-foot-tall man, to escort me to my car. I'm paranoid the whole car ride home. How did he find me? My university is close, about 15 minutes away, but not that close. It involves quite a few turns, and he really didn't look like a student. After like 5 to 6 more days of signal BS, I get tired and tell my boyfriend and my parents about it. My parents freak out. They live in another country as expats, so it's not like I could leave my home either. My parents and boyfriend are all on a conference call with me, so they're discussing how this guy is possibly following me. Then my boyfriend suggests that maybe it's because of my car. I've only personally seen 1 to 2 of them in my city, and my car color was rose gold, so literally anyone could spot me. It wouldn't be that hard for him to follow the only rose gold car in the city. They all come up with the idea of my boyfriend switching cars with me for the next few weeks. I was also to leave for my class 2 hours before my normal schedule to throw him off and tint my boyfriend's car so that the creep doesn't spot me in the new car. My boyfriend also gets my own car tinted. The tints for both cars are illegal by Ontario's standards, but at this point, we'd rather pay fines than get followed by the creep. This plan works. I no longer see him, and I really do think he was following my car around. Maybe he even go to a local hangout spots and check the parking lots to see if he could spot my car. Either way, for the next few weeks, it all works out and everything's fine. Then one day, while I'm heading to the gym, I get a call from my boyfriend that the creep is following him in my car. My car is tinted at this point, so the creep doesn't know it's my boyfriend in there and not me. He says that he's calling the cops and to use our Find My Friend feature to keep an eye on where he's heading just in case something happens. I'm legit worried at this point. After a few hours, I hear back. So after my boyfriend called the police, the dispatch said that the cops wanted him to drive to the mall parking. There's a police station at this mall, and the cop could come out to his car in plain clothing to ward off suspicion. The creep was of course following my boyfriend in my car, and the cop affirmed this, approached the creep and apprehended him. He threatened him with stalking, took down his info and gave him a serious warning. My boyfriend had gotten out of the car by then, and the creep apparently stared daggers at him the whole time. This creep was never able to find me again, and my parents in the meanwhile had worked to get me moved to a new home outside of downtown, in a more affluent neighborhood where I wouldn't stick out too much. I've also changed my license plate. Still have tint, but also changed my car color so it's more natural. Now if I rarely ever go to the downtown Mississauga area, I always have to watch behind my back. When I was 17, I moved to a college 2 hours away from home and took residence in the dorms on campus. The dorms were not run through the school, but through a management company. There were a lot of safety problems in the dorms as a result of this. Assaults, ODs, drugs, shootings right outside. I'm a 100-pound female, so I always watched out for serious situations around me. Everything was great. I had some awful roommates, but I was mostly left alone. One day in September, I was leaving for class early in the morning when I spotted a condom taped to my name tag on the door. It had a note that said, "Call me, XOXO," with some random phone number. I told the RAs and nothing came of it. I just thought it was some random prank pulled by one of the guys on the floor. Things went south with my roommates, mostly because of my night terrors, scaring them, even though I warned them before we even agreed to be roommates. So I was moved into a 2-bedroom dorm with my new roommate Jay. We each had our own room. After a week of living there, I started noticing that things were appearing in the living room while we were sleeping. I asked Jay about it, and she vehemently denied it was her. One day we noticed that the lock on the front door did not lock properly. If you pulled on the lock and twisted the handle at the same time, the door would come open. Around the same time, I started to get Snapchats of inappropriate things, vague threats and offers for great sex. I would get ones that would say things like, "You look great today with that specific article of clothing I was wearing." I filed a report to the dorms to get the lock fixed, but it took 4 months, 8 complaints, threat of legal action, and my friend D yelling at them to get any action. We got our door fixed, but the presence still appeared outside of the door with notes for me. I was still receiving Snapchats, but I moved out of the dorms into an apartment with my then boyfriend. The Snapchats continued, then I started getting calls at my work. I worked from the dean's office of my college, and I was in charge of answering phones. Every day I would get 3 or more calls from randomly generated numbers. Discovered it was through apps like Viber and Skype after I reported it to the police and they investigated. I would answer the phone. "CLAS, Dean's office, how may I help you?" I would hear heavy breathing for a few seconds, and then they would hang up. I thought it was just some 12-year-old pranking our office until my coworker got a call. She answered with her name, and the person on the line asked if they could speak with me. Thinking it was one of the deans that I had been working with, she forwarded it to my phone. I answered, and I received the same heavy breathing and hung up. I reported it to my boss, and she did nothing. One of the deans overheard the conversation and reported it to Title IX. Oh boy, talking to them was a mistake. After meeting with them, the threats started getting worse, and this person found me in my new apartment. One day in December, I was dog-sitting 2 wonderful dogs who hated other dogs and would bark at them on sight. It was around 11 p.m. and I decided to take them out before bed. We get outside. To the right of me is a bunch of thick trees that are hard to see through. I start to take the girls to the grass on the left. They start growling and barking at something in the trees. Thinking it's another dog, I try to pull them away, but they will not budge. I glance over, and out of the trees comes a tall man. But weird thing is he's wearing a Michael Myers-like mask. He starts rushing towards me. The dogs get between me and him, and he stops. I run up the stairs behind me into the apartment as he is disappearing into the trees again. Stupidly, I don't call the police, but I see him one more time before I move to my new apartment. Things are quiet for a while. My boyfriend and I break up, and I spend the first few days in the new apartment alone. Come to find out that the window that can be accessed from the ground doesn't lock. One morning I wake up, everything seems normal. I check the mirror to do my hair for work. I have a bald spot. My head was shaved in the middle of the night. I find my hair tied up in knots in an envelope. I immediately call the police. They do an investigation, find the window was broken, but couldn't find anything to figure out who it was that came into my apartment. They asked me to compile a list of everything that was missing, and the only thing gone other than my hair was 3 pairs of dirty underwear. I have photos of the hair and a bald spot if anyone is interested. An investigation finds no one. I have since moved. I no longer answer phone calls at work, and I keep bear spray next to my bed at all times. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, our LetsReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.